The cabinet key was still warm in her hand when the director's office door slammed shut. "You violated federal medication protocol. Effective immediately, you're suspended." His voice didn't waver. Maya didn't say a word, just unpinned her badge and set it on the desk. No one mentioned that the man she'd saved with that dose of 58-year-old veteran in the middle of a panic attack was alive because of her. She stepped into the empty hallway, unfamiliar eyes following her every move. 48 hours later, the national news aired the face of a retired Army doctor. "Maya Thompson is the reason my comrade is still alive." If you believe compassion should never be a reason to lose your job, comment that exact word. In the long, dim corridor of the Veterans Hospital, fluorescent lights spilled across the cold tile floor. The air was filled with the dry rhythm of an office printer's humming, shoes clicking against the ground, the heavy thud of a stamp hitting paper. At the intake desk, an elderly veteran leaned on his cane, hands trembling, while the clerk flipped through his file and read aloud each clause he needed to sign. No one here rushed for anyone unless the paperwork was complete. Maya Thompson walked past, arms wrapped around a thick stack of case files. Her eyes lingered for a moment on the man waiting, then shifted toward her office, as if to remind herself, don't get involved. Not your assignment today. 7 years on the job had taught her how to survive, follow procedure, keep quiet, and don't let your heart get in the way. But something still smoldered beneath the surface, an unshakable question. Was this place really built to heal, or just to keep everything neatly locked inside a file? Maya didn't have an answer yet, but she knew one thing. Sooner or later, the system would put her to the test. At 34, Maya was slim, her naturally curly hair pulled back in a neat bun. Every morning she wore a plain suit, pinned on her name badge, and walked into the hospital with a cup of black coffee. She had a reputation for being by the book, never once written up. But to some, that professionalism also meant coldness. She wasn't cold, she just knew that the more she let compassion show, the more she'd get pulled into battles she couldn't win. Over the years, she'd learned to listen to patients, but only within the limits allowed. And whenever she felt the urge to do more, her mind would remind her, don't break the rules. Still, whenever she finished signing off on a stack of paperwork, she felt a strange emptiness inside, uncertain if it was just exhaustion or a quiet warning that one day she'd have to choose between what was right on paper and what was right for a human being in need. That day, Maya had a scheduled counseling session with John Miller, a 58-year-old veteran. He sat in the office, eyes distant, hands clenched, tight. Halfway through their conversation, his breathing grew shallow, sweat beading across his forehead. Maya recognized the signs of a panic attack. She had seen them in her own father's last years. She pressed the call button for a nurse. A young woman came in, listened to Maya's explanation, then shook her head. The on-call doctors in the ER will need his signature, minimum 2 hours. 2 hours. Maya looked at John, his shoulders shaking. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in. On the desk lay the paperwork, the clauses, the signatures like invisible wires binding a man who needed help now. And for the first time in years, Maya's hand no longer wanted to hold onto the shield, called procedure. She stood in front of the emergency medication cabinet at the end of the hall. A red sign on the door made it clear, authorized physicians only. The wall clock ticked loudly, counting down the seconds John might not have. In her mind flashed the image of her father lying motionless on the kitchen floor. He, too, had suffered a panic attack, and the medicine had come too late. Without asking anyone, Maya took the key from the medical office drawer, unlocked the cabinet, and pulled out a dose of sedatives. Every step out of the hospital, she could feel the invisible eyes of cameras and the weight of reports waiting to be filed. But the fear couldn't outweigh the sight of a man drowning in panic. By the time she reached the parking lot, the vial was clenched tight in her hand. No plan, no thought of consequences, just one goal: get the medicine to John before it was too late. John's apartment was on the 3rd floor, the door ajar. Maya stepped inside, her pulse racing. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, a paring knife in his hand. His eyes darted wildly, as if searching for a way out of his own mind. She knelt in front of him, placing the medicine and a glass of water into his hands. "John, take this. Trust me." Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled. He hesitated a moment, then swallowed the pills. 5 minutes passed. His breathing slowed. His grip loosened. The knife clattered softly to the floor. John looked up, eyes wet. "You just saved my life." Maya smiled, but the relief was tangled with the sense that what she'd just done was far from over. Back at the hospital, Maya returned the cabinet key to its exact place. She thought she could quietly carry on with her day, but at the nurse's station, a colleague's eyes flicked toward her cold, sharp. On the desk lay an incident report form with one damning note: removed medication from premises. That afternoon, while pouring coffee in the break room, the phone rang. The caller ID read, "Director's office." Maya picked up. The secretary's voice was crisp. "Please report to the director immediately to explain certain matters regarding medication distribution." Maya set down her still steaming cup. Outside the window, the sky had gone gray. In that moment, she knew the storm had just arrived. The next morning, Maya walked into the director's office. On the desk lay a thick, red-bound file stamped in bold, "temporary suspension." The director's voice was flat, emotionless. "You violated federal medication protocols. Effective immediately, you are suspended until the investigation concludes." No one mentioned that John was alive because of her. No questions about why she did it. Only clauses, policies, and signatures. Maya sat silently, the sound of the world outside sealed away. Walking back down the familiar hallway, she felt like the building itself was watching her. She knew she hadn't just lost her job, she'd stepped into a fight with the entire machine. At lunch, Maya entered the cafeteria. Conversations dimmed. A colleague she'd sat beside for 3 years avoided her gaze, quickly taking her tray and leaving. At another table, a group of nurses whispered, glancing her way. She chose an empty table, forcing down a few spoonfuls of soup that tasted of nothing. She'd never felt the hospital so cold, though the thermostat was the same. No one spoke, but the silence told her enough they wouldn't stand beside her. Once Maya had believed that if she ever faced trouble, a few friends would speak up. Now she saw clearly, in this world, silence could be more dangerous than open accusations. That evening, a knock at the door. John stood there in his worn coat, holding an envelope. He set the letter on her table, a handwritten account of the night Maya saved his life. "I'll read it anywhere, to anyone. They can't destroy you." Maya was touched but concerned. PTSD didn't take well to public pressure, and she didn't want John hurt any further. "John, this could make things worse for you," she said softly. He shook his head. "You risked yourself for me. Now let me risk myself for you." Still, Maya stayed silent. She knew that if John stepped forward, the battle would no longer be hers alone. A few days later, Maya got a call from a reporter named Rachel. Her voice was young but steady. "I heard about a veteran you saved. I want to tell that story, not for shock value, but so people understand the truth." Rachel met with John first, bringing medical records and knowledge. She, too, had lost her father, a veteran, to delays in treatment. After much hesitation, John agreed to be interviewed. Maya didn't attend the taping, but in her gut, she knew once this story went public, there'd be no going back. From that moment, her work would no longer be confined to the 4 walls of the hospital. The interview dropped on a Monday morning. John sat in a small room, soft light washing over him, speaking slowly about the night. Maya came to his door. The knock, her trembling hands offering the pills, the feeling of being pulled back from the edge. His words spread quickly. Comments poured in. "She's a hero. Why punish someone for saving a life?" Thousands of shares followed, each one calling to protect kindness from being crushed by bureaucracy. Maya watched the notifications scroll past on her laptop. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially in a story that cut both ways, one side praising her, the other sharpening its knives. But deep down, she knew this was the point of no return. That afternoon, Maya was called into a closed-door meeting. The hospital director, a lawyer, and 2 senior administrators sat waiting. On the table lay an amended statement they wanted her to sign declaring the incident a procedural misunderstanding in exchange for dropping all disciplinary action. "Sign this and it all goes away," the lawyer said evenly. Maya looked at the paper. Signing meant betraying the truth. Refusing meant walking straight into the storm. The room felt heavy. Finally, she set the pen down. "I can't sign. The truth isn't something you bargain with." Faces tightened. She knew they weren't going to let her off easy. 2 days later, a retired Army doctor appeared on national television. He introduced himself as John's former commanding officer and looked straight into the camera. "Maya Thompson saved the life of one of my men. She did what anyone in uniform would do, put a human life above protocol." His words ignited a wave of support. Veterans groups spoke out, doctors wrote open letters demanding policy changes. Maya watched the news with a mix of gratitude and dread. The more public the support, the harder the system would hit back. It didn't take long. Maya received a letter from the state licensing board. The language was cold. Expanded investigation, possible permanent revocation of license. At the same time, certain newspapers began framing her as a danger to the medical field. Her phone buzzed constantly, some messages full of thanks, others spitting insults. She was caught between two worlds out there. The public called her a hero. On paper, she was just an employee awaiting a decision that could end her career. Maya understood this was no longer just her story. But moving forward meant accepting the possibility of losing everything. The day of the hearing, the room was packed. Maya sat on one side of the table. Across from her were the licensing board and the hospital's leadership. Midway through, the medical examiner took the stand. He opened the file, his voice steady. Based on biometrics and medical records, John Miller's condition that evening was critical. A delay of 15-20 minutes could have resulted in death. The room fell silent. No one could dispute it. Data, charts, and medical conclusions transformed Maya's act from violation to documented life-saving. She looked down at her hands, the tension of months easing, not in triumph, but in relief that the truth was finally recorded. 2 weeks later, the Department of Veterans Affairs issued a new regulation. Trained social workers were now authorized to dispense emergency medication in life-threatening situations. The directive went to every medical facility in the system. News outlets showed Maya's face, but she declined all interviews. At a press conference, a spokesperson admitted the Thompson case directly influenced this change. Maya knew it wouldn't erase what she'd been through, but at least it might save lives, people she might never meet. When her reinstatement order arrived, Maya had already resigned. She turned down a management role, choosing instead to work at a training center for social workers. There, she taught emergency intervention skills, sharing her experience as a living case study. No cameras, no tense hearings, just small classrooms and young people listening closely. Maya realized that sometimes the biggest change comes from the quietest work. A year later, she happened to catch a local news segment. A young social worker had saved a veteran from a panic attack by administering emergency medication exactly as allowed under the new rule. The reporter closed the story, "Without this policy, that life might have been lost." Maya smiled, her hand warming around her teacup. No one needed to say her name. She knew the flame had been passed on, and somewhere out there, a life had just been spared by an act that seems simple, but never is, for those who dare to do it. If you believe that choosing compassion over rules is still worth the cost, hit like, comment, compassion for those who put lives above protocol, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what doing the right thing truly looks like.